Yes,
All
people
right.
are typing and saying yes.
Great. Good morning, everyone. Whether you're here with us at PSU or joining online, thanks so much. My name is Marissa Straley. I am the coordinator for GlobalPDX. And so we're really excited to have our first workshop this morning, one of many, many more to come. And this actually comes out of a conversation that Andrew and I had a few months ago when I got to know more about blueEnergy. And in that conversation, Andrew was explaining the history of blueEnergy and the work that they're doing now. It was very apparent that they've gone through a little bit of change in your approach to your work, and working in several different countries as a small organization had an interesting story to share with others. And so we talked about doing this workshop, and we're really, really excited that it's come to fruition. So I'm going to step aside, but we'll talk a bit about GlobalPDX later. Also, we have coffee, so please help yourselves. Thank you to Lauren and to Insurance for that. For those of you online, sorry that you can't benefit from the coffee, but hopefully you have some coffee wherever you are. And so with that, I will leave it to Andrew.
Thank you. I think the structure is we talk for 45 minutes or so, and then more discussion style. We want to hear about your challenges as well. And you know, while we're going through and presenting just a little bit of background of blueEnergy and some of the steps we've been through, feel free to jump in with clarification questions and comments.
And we are recording the session today as well, so that'll be shared out with the slide deck.
Sure. So just a little bit about blueEnergy. You know, obviously, we're passionate about our mission, our vision, our impact. That's not really why we're here today. We want to talk more about administrative systems and what sort of supports the impact work that we do. I think a lot of members in GlobalPDX, you know, share a passion for the mission and vision of international development, holistic programming. But our focus is really on empowering healthy families and resilient communities. And we do that with 4 different integrated programs targeting income generation, health, and capacity building locally. So we have a renewable energy program. We work with solar power, biogas, cook stoves, water, sanitation, hygiene. So water access, purification, gray water filtration, sort of the whole gambit of water and hygiene. Climate change program primarily concerned with food security and threats to that from climate change, and looking at how renewable energy and water and sanitation integrate into food systems. And then last is the Global Leadership Program, which has a couple different components, but we have a summer fellowship program for current undergraduate students, typically some graduate students who want to get experience in the field in integrated community development. And then we also have a senior fellowship program for people who are into their careers. It's sort of like the Peace Corps. You come for a 1 or 2 year commitment to work in the field as a staff member. So we've been working since 2004, is when we launched in Nicaragua, and we started working in Ethiopia 3 years ago. Just to give you a little bit of context of our geographies. Very different contexts, very different accounting, finance, legal jurisdictions. And that's, you know, everything we're going to talk about today. I want you to keep in mind, we're sharing our story. Right? We don't have any prescriptive solutions for anybody. If you're a $10 million organization working locally, if you're a $1 million organization working in Senegal, if you're working in Nicaragua, like the solutions are very different. And what is appropriate is very different depending on the context. So just trying to give you a rapid snapshot of what our context is to explain where we came from and sort of some of the decisions we've made along the way. So how we're structured, this is the simple version of how it looks. We have blueEnergy International, which is based in Eugene, Oregon. It's also where blueEnergy US is, share an office. That's Andrew and I. We're sort of those 2 boxes right there.
I load in my conference room every once in a while, / my couch.
blueEnergy Nicaragua is where most of, yeah. Can they actually hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. blueEnergy Nicaragua is sort of our center of gravity. That's where most of our staff lies and where most of the work has been taking place. blueEnergy France, we have a support office there. It is actually separately incorporated in France. It's part of the blueEnergy group. And they are managing directly our partnership with a local nonprofit organization in Ethiopia. So this is the simple version of going through it. And normally I don't go any deeper than this. Because the purpose today is how do you deal with complex administrative issues when you're trying to do the good work. The next one.
Yelling at the home.
It's a little hard to read because it's what it actually looks like on the inside. It's the same layout graph, but overlaid with jurisdictions that we have compliance obligations to, different finance systems, where we're incorporated, where different board of directors are, and who is accountable to who. The basic, again, for context for us, is that we incorporated first in the United States, in Washington, D.C. as a 501c3. Then we started working in Nicaragua through a partnership with a technical school, and then eventually, about 2-3 years later, we registered as an international nonprofit organization doing business in Nicaragua. So we are legally registered in Nicaragua, but we are not a domestic nonprofit organization. So because of that, in Nicaragua, the IRS views all of our activities in Nicaragua, it has to roll up. So when we report to the IRS in our 990, our activities, our expenses, all of that stuff, we have to roll it up and report it to the IRS. France, on the other hand, is a separate legal entity. It is incorporated under French law domestically. Therefore, it has to have its own board of directors in France. So then we had to figure out how to negotiate a memorandum of understanding between the international board of directors, which is supposed to be the highest governing body, and the French board of directors.
Are you going to elaborate later on why you made that decision for France?
You can just ask right now.
Okay. So,
right.
Yeah, like why?
Right, so why? So it has a lot to do with our history. It's particulars of our history. One of the co-founders is French, and the number of people involved in the organization early on are French. So it made sense shortly after we registered shortly after we incorporated in the United States, we incorporated in France, to be able to recruit talent, to be able to have access to European funds. So very few European sources of funding would ever fund an American-based nonprofit organization, even if you're doing work in the Francophone country in Africa, but certainly not if you're working in Nicaragua. France has very little interest in funding a U.S. organization to work in Nicaragua.
Does that help with your fellowship program as well?
Exactly.
City connection?
Exactly, and that's how it started. It started really as the original intent was sort of a fundraising arm with some talent recruitment. But it really did grow into a pretty strong self-standing entity, in part because the French government has incentives and support for people to go work internationally. So I think there's several organizations like La Guilde, and they have all these it's like the Peace Corps in a sense. And you can stay registered in the French system with French insurance, accruing retirement points, even though you're working in Nicaragua for an NGO. So because of that, a lot of our fellows for our global leadership program have come through France. And that remains true today. And a lot of our project funding comes through France as well. So it ended up being an important strategic decision for us, but it also adds a lot of complexity. French work culture is very different from American work culture, is very different from Nicaraguan work culture. Different compliance. We have to file in France. We're audited in France. We have, there's a lot of administrative steps that we have to go through. And one of my key roles as the International Executive Director is to aggregate all of this information, to present it to the board in a consolidated way. So this is our team in Nicaragua with a few board members and strategic visitors from a trip earlier this year. Extremely diverse group of people. Extremely diverse group. A lot of benefit to that and a lot of challenges to that administratively. People speaking different languages, people with very different backgrounds, education levels, knowledge of computers, etc. Go next. Go next. And this is some of the key stakeholders with our partnership in Ethiopia. Some of the members of the French team who are down there supporting them, and then some of the local team that actually manage the local nonprofit organization. But again, there you're introducing a lot of variance in. So when you think about the kind of administrative systems you can build and what's going to be most effective, for us this is a critical factor. So diversity component. Just in terms of scale, again, because I think a lot of what it comes down to when you're thinking about what's the best choice for you is about your scale. Right? So we're around $1 million. We ran about $1 million last year, hoping for a little higher this year. Yeah. So that's the institution. Myself, I'm the international executive director and co-founder of the organization. I have a pretty strong background in computers and data systems, studied it in graduate school. So again, that's an important context thing, because a lot of small nonprofits, even medium-sized nonprofits, one of the things you have to think about is what internal capabilities you have in your organization. But I'm comfortable with this stuff. Then we have Andrew here.
So I'm Andrew Clark. I'm the U.S. Country Director for BlueEnergy. So I joined the organization about 1.5 years ago. Prior to that, I was a social worker, actually. But my original career was in the tech sector. So adoption, implementation, integration, some sales, some support, and translation. And so I made the decision. I got fed up with the corporate world after I finished the last startup that I was involved with. Accidentally fell into social work while I was in grad school, and then discovered BlueEnergy and made the transition.
So that's important to understand for why we have made some of the decisions that we've made. Go ahead. So I think we wanted to very quickly talk about the mission, vision, and what we're doing as an organization. But I think the point of the workshop today is that in order to execute against big vision, you have to have a strong, robust administrative system. And what that means is very context specific. Doesn't mean going out and buying the fanciest software platform and bringing in the fanciest consultants, right? You have to think about your budget, what you have in terms of internal capabilities. And every time you think about adding a new administrative component, first thing you want to know is know the result that you want. Right? That seems like a trivial point, but very often people are motivated to dive into deploying a new system because it sounds awesome and it sounds like it's going to do a bunch of stuff and it has bells and whistles. But is it actually going to get you what you want? Right? Everything comes with a cost. So be very clear about the results that you want to begin with. Second is understanding context and what matters. So context, external and internal. What your compliance obligations are external, for example. What your capabilities and talents and things that you're good at internal to your organization, how much money you have, what the size of your budget is. Those are all critical. And what matters is an important point. It's about materiality. Right? Especially I come from an engineering background originally. So in engineering, we were taught it all matters. Everything has to be perfect. A to Z, just march through everything. So that's the exact opposite of what I discovered when I went into social entrepreneurship and international development, where it's just chaos. There's just chaos everywhere all the time, and you're trying to carve out your piece and move a piece forward. Right? It's a totally different mentality. And I had to learn over the last 13, 14 years of working what matters, what is material here. Because an engineer thinks that everything has to be perfect, and you spend a lot of time and resources on things, and it doesn't get you what you want. It doesn't get you more funding. It doesn't improve your how you're perceived in the public eye. It doesn't actually move the needle on what you care about. So materiality is key. And number 3, then you can get your shit together. And Andrew, could you cue up our little video here? Oh, maybe it won't work in GoToMeeting. Yeah. Okay, a little bit of humor because, at the end of the day, it is about getting your shit together. If you can't keep everything organized, you can't have perfect systems. You need to just get enough of your stuff organized to be able to move forward on your vision. So, with all that in mind, one of our pet peeves internally is best practices. Because it's important to keep in mind that best practices are developed within a specific context, and they tend to be developed by very high-capacity professionals in very well-resourced environments who have the luxury of doing long studies and saying, well, this is how everything ought to be done. But again, the reality of this work for most people, and congratulations if it's not, is some people get in very well-resourced organizations or have extreme skill in this area, but for most people, you're not going to be doing best practices in administration. That's not why you got in this business. You got in it for the program components. You want to have social impact. And you need your administrative systems to be good enough to get you what you need to move forward. Right? So best practices can be very kind of undermining. You spend all of your time and energy reading about them and trying to be like them and constantly be disappointed. And if you set your board up, or if your board has expectations around that, you'll constantly not meet that expectation. Right? So we invite you to just leave all those books behind. And the conversation we want to have today is about how do you do good enough practices.
My business school teachers are rolling over in their grave, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah, I never went to business school, so.
I died a little bit making this slide.
Okay, so very, very basic decision-making framework that we use to think through these decisions. So the first is, what is the desired decision or action that you want to see? Right? What is the desired decision that you want to improve with the new system? Maybe you feel you aren't allocating your resources well enough. There's something that you're not optimizing, that you're unhappy about in your organization, or action, like the government is telling you, you need to show us this information. Right? You start with that in mind. Don't get drawn into new systems, new software platforms, new gizmos, just because it looks interesting. If you can't clearly define that, then stop. Okay? Then capacity. That's looking internally. You want to take that one?
Sure. So it's, oftentimes we measure capacity by can we afford to pay for the software solution. But especially when you're working in a cross-cultural or multinational context, you have a lot of other variables to consider. So it's not just about is the software or the solution English only, for example, if you're working across languages. But you also need to look across regulatory compliances. You need to look at how familiar are your staff with the solutions, how much capacity does your staff actually have in terms of time, energy, well-being, to engage with this solution, and is this a problem that can actually effectively even be addressed in the context in which you're trying to operate? That kind of leads us into the constraint component, though, which is the more external facing dimension of this. So again, what are the regulatory requirements? Are you meeting the necessary steps, not just for your US compliance? So when we look at accounting software, for example, yes, ultimately our final audience is the IRS, for example, but we're also audited locally in Nicaragua. So we have to be able to make sure that the software works in both Spanish and English. We have to make sure that it meets the regulatory compliance requirements for Nicaragua and then ultimately for the US. But you have to be able to segment out what those external constraints are to be able to identify the best solution to move forward with.
Yeah, and if you're working globally in very different contexts and you have a very diverse staff, capacity and constraint kind of hand in hand. Think about people's familiarity with computers, right? You come from Portland or San Francisco, New York, big international program, tend to think, yeah, we're going to roll out some online software platform, it's going to be great, it's going to all be integrated. Then you realize, oh, people actually were never trained in computers. They don't have computers in their home. They don't have that background, that culture. So how are you going to build that? Or do you work around it and you don't build it, right? So understanding what your staff is capable of. And that's one of our biggest learnings over the 14 years, is me coming out of graduate school, in IT trying to roll out systems that just could not be absorbed locally. And then having to learn from that experience and try again. Other constraints can be things like internet connectivity. Right? And that's a huge one if you work international. If you're out there doing community development, it means you're probably in communities that don't, it's becoming less true with time, but 14 years ago, when we launched in Nicaragua, we had dial-up internet. It's extremely expensive. You get online for a couple minutes a day, send a couple emails, receive a couple emails. Forget about sending pictures or any of that stuff, right? So that's changed with time. But a lot of the communities we work with don't have cell phone reception, don't have internet reception. So how you think about designing administrative solutions is going to be directly related to those constraints. And that gets you to your design and administrative, a good enough solution. Not a best practices, but something that's good enough to get you what you need. So thinking about, we're using the term administrative systems sort of generally. I mean, that could be your talent management system, that could be your customer relationship management system, your donor management system, your communication system, your marketing system, the whole sort of ecosystem of systems. But thinking about it from a system perspective, we tend to naturally gravitate towards the operation of the system. That's where our focus tends to be. Somebody's coming and selling you a new software platform, or you heard about a software platform that just magically manages all of your donor contact relationship stuff. Right? That's where you tend to focus your attention. But it's really, really important to think about the whole system that it exists as a part of. Because when you think about your capacity and your constraints, this is what you have to be able to achieve. Right? I mean, the sector is littered with very poor deployments of new administrative systems that frustrate everybody, that don't get the desired result. And oftentimes it's because we're thinking just about here. In reality, we have to start with knowing what the goal is, the purpose of the system, what do we hope to get out of it. Workflow. This is the step that is often skipped or most poorly understood. If you don't understand internally to your organization how you want to administer some piece, then you can't move it into a software system. Right? Software systems are like hammers. They aren't magic. You have to say, well, we want to receive the check this way, then photocopy it, and then we want to deposit it this way, and this person has to, you have to have that mapped out, that workflow process, before you can figure out how it's going to integrate with a software system. That step is often skipped or poorly understood, and when you're budgeting, you tend to think, oh, okay, we're going to buy the license for this much, and we have enough money, let's go for it, and then, oh wait, we have to hire consultants who are going to do workflow mapping, because we don't have that capacity internal to our staff. System design, how are you actually going to modify the system and customize it to make it fit for your organization? Building it, actually doing the customization. Training, especially in an international context. Training can be a massive expense and complexity and often doesn't work. And you've got the manual in English. It's like when you work with people who don't read or read in a different language or aren't familiar with computers. That's big. And if you get through all of that, then you're operating your system and you're getting your results. But the second dimension is that this is an iterative process. I mean, it's linear in the beginning. The first time through, it's linear. But administrative systems are living systems. It's not a pencil. It's not a widget. I mean, you just build and then it's done. Right? It's like that's the beginning of an ongoing process of having to curate it and take care of it. So something that's very common in nonprofit organizations, especially in international development organizations, is turnover. Right? You build the system, you get your people trained, and the consultants are gone and the project's over. A month later, 2 people left the organization, 4 new ones have come in. Who's training them? Who's training them on the system? That's a high failure point. Just because some staff members got trained doesn't mean they can train the new staff members who come in. In fact, often they can't. It's often a capability they don't have. Your goals can change. So what you want the system to actually be doing for you, you want a different piece of information to come out of it. Well, you've got to go back to the beginning and move through the process again. Workflow, you have the same goal, but you created a new position in your organization. this person is no longer cashing your check. You've got a different person who's doing that. So the workflow changes. And then system design. Sometimes software updates can happen to you, change the architecture of the system, or sometimes you might want to implement changes there. But all of that requires a lot of capacity, can require a lot of capacity. So that either comes internal to your staff, or that comes from outside consultants. Right?
I like how we told you to throw out all best practices and then we give you a best practice.
Yes. Well, I would describe this more as this is a natural law. I mean, this is the way that it is. This is not a best practice. You can go ahead and jump in here, but you will suffer the consequences of not having mapped your workflow into system design. Now, the good news is these don't have to be each extremely intensive processes. Like the good news is, and this is more true now than it was 14 years ago, there's tons of great tools out there that are cheap, and some of them are pretty simple. You still have to go through this process though. And you can get outside help, and you might have a board member who can provide some ongoing support, or you might have an ongoing administrative grant, or a sophisticated donor who's willing to support that. There's ways to move through this efficiently, and there are solutions available today. That's the good news. But you're still subject to these steps.
I think that's the important piece to walk away from today with is there is no single tool that allows you to skip any of these steps, no matter what they tell you. The marketing material is all designed to make you believe, in particular with software solutions, that it's going to just take care of these for you. There is no panacea that will immediately remove one of these steps from your overall design and implementation strategy. It might streamline it, it might make it more efficient, but it still has to happen, and it still involves human engagement, most likely from the leadership that's actually implementing the change process. So I think this is the main key takeaway for today.
So those are just some high-level processes that we think about, but what are some of the guiding principles that we keep in mind as we think about this? And I apologize, there's a lot of words here. You're going to get a copy of the slide deck, so you don't have to write it all down. But this is the one piece where we wanted to actually get some text in. I already talked about this one, but it can't be emphasized enough. Materiality is critical. Nonprofits always have a much bigger mission than what their resources allow. That is the nature of the business. And that's becoming more true. Resources are getting tighter and need is getting greater. So that's the external context. If you're good, you try to keep those from getting too out of balance. You try to carve out a piece that is digestible. But ultimately, you have to be able to focus on materiality and recognize that most things, especially on the admin side, don't need to be great. They just need to be good enough. So you can move forward and save your energy for having the best program model, right? And doing the best recruiting and training of your staff, like the things that really matter to delivering your mission. This third one, you can't put out all the fires, but you should know the risks posed by the fires that you let rage. I mean, it's a corollary lesson to that, but it was something I was very uncomfortable with until a couple of years ago. The reality of saying you can't do everything great, most things are just good enough. There's also things you just can't address. Like there's fires, like you know that you need a better accounting system. You know your website sucks. You know that you're not doing enough staff training, right? And a lot of that stuff, there's no time, money, energy to fix those. Maybe not this year, or maybe never. So oftentimes, to me, like part of being sustainable in this sector is recognizing what those fires are and finding a way to be comfortable knowing that they're burning. And they're burning all around. And again, as an engineer, that was very, very difficult to accept. But that's the reality, especially when you go out into the world outside the United States, where chaos is the norm. But just because you're not going to put out all the fires doesn't excuse you from knowing what the risks are. And this will come up, we'll talk a little bit later about security, for example. Right? When you're deploying your systems, your accounting systems, your communication systems, security management is extremely challenging to do, especially in high turnover situations. So you might just not be good at that. And you might say, okay, we're willing to accept that risk, but you should know what that risk is. If an employment relationship goes sour and somebody walks off with the access codes, what could happen to all of your data, for example? You need to know the risks. The holy grail of fully integrated systems doesn't exist. I was very disappointed to discover as an engineer.
And if you find it, go into the tech sector because you'll make millions.
The idea that your customer relationship management should be integrated with your accounting, which should be integrated with your marketing, which should be integrated with yada 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 yada.
And to clarify, when we refer to integration in a software context, what we mean is that there's a flow of data between platforms or systems with limited to no human interaction. So, just for clarity's sake.
Yeah. So don't spend too much time and energy looking for it, because it's not out there.
And don't buy the snake oil from the software sales people that are going to tell you they can do it.
Always think in terms of time horizon. You can often accept simple solutions now. Very important lesson that I learned. I started my career trying to make everything complicated, integrated, so that it would be seamless and the data would only be in one place. And what I've learned over 14 years is back way off of that. And oftentimes, a simple Excel spreadsheet will solve the issue for now, especially if you're small, especially if you're early stage, and especially if it's not a major government compliance issue that has to be just so, right? If it's a ballpark's going to be good enough, then probably an Excel sheet is good enough too. And you might say, okay, I'm going to do that this year, and 5 years from now, I hope that that is integrated into our accounting platform and happens in an automated way. That's going to cost $50,000 in consulting fees, and where are we going to find that money? It's time horizon, or what you might accept now. Yeah, I've already mentioned this one, but it's about supporting better decision making and a specific action. If you can't define what that is, then just stop. Just stop. Get back to work. Luis, we talked about this the other day. Data being infinite, and most of it is useless, right? Bean counters will always count beans, and analysts will always analyze infinitely, right? There's very few pieces of data that actually matter to you and your business and making your organization better and improving your impact. Spend more time figuring out what those very few things are and just ignore the rest. And there'll be tremendous pressure, you probably already are under tremendous pressure, to measure all sorts of random stuff, right? Now sometimes you just have to accept it. Because if the funding comes with this requirement and you like the funding and it's going to help your mission, then you just measure it and move on. You don't worry about it. But if there's an opportunity to push back and say, and challenge funders politely, what are you going to do with that information? What decision is that going to help you make? And we've been successful with some foundations, family foundations, privately held foundations, who are willing to sit down at a table with you, be on the same team, and talk about it. And when we're executing USAID funds, there's no conversation. So know what game you're playing and know who's at the table with you. And if there's an opportunity, try to simplify. Always try to simplify. Do you want to talk about that one? One of your favorites?
This is one of my favorite points. Data is not the same thing as information and knowledge. So data is just the raw data. It's just raw inputs. And it doesn't become information that is useful to drive action until it's been contextualized, and that requires human interaction. But it also requires the ability to understand the systems that are processing that data to generate that information. And so when we talk about constraints and capacity, for example, this is oftentimes really where the crux happens, is we have lots of great data, but the process itself does not produce effective information for us to be able to use to take it to the action stage. And I like to separate out knowledge from this as well, because it is a flow. So once you've used that information to take action and you bring it back in as a learning moment, it becomes knowledge. You have to capture that learning as institutional memory. And that is actually a separate step. We often assume that just because we have the information, we have the action, we know what the outcome was, that is enough. But add in turnover, add in cross-cultural communication, add in all of these various dimensions, and thinking about how you're managing that institutional knowledge and memory is another key important system to keep in mind as you think about your overall ecosystem of administrative processes.
Could you give an example
Of which, like the whole flow as a whole, as a whole. So I mean, I think if impact is oftentimes an area that we all struggle with, right? How do you define impact? How do you measure impact? And the conversation often stops there. We capture the numbers. So we installed 5 wells. That's a piece of data. But now we can turn that into information by contextualizing it with perhaps other data or qualitative information. So we know that those 5 wells impacted 25 families each. And we know that just from our conversations with the impact groups that we were able to reduce missed days at work and school by 50%. So we can put all of that together into a narrative to create information that we can use to drive action. We can use that either in the reporting process, or we can use that to look at the overall funding landscape and see perhaps not just who's interested in building wells, but who's interested in overall health and well-being that we could then sell wells to as a process to reducing school absenteeism. We then use that process, and then we have to figure out how we're going to log that. So for example, we log all of our interactions with external parties in Salesforce. So I've been able to capture how I've leveraged the data that I converted into information in the form of a narrative to drive an action. Did I receive more funding? Did I receive less funding? What did people respond back to me based on that information? Did they really react to it? Nobody really actually cared about the fact that people were going to work. People cared that children were going to school more often. So I have to be able to capture that knowledge because that might be another data point ultimately. So it is another iterative cycle, right? So this all goes together. But when I leave the organization, for example, how does somebody know that this small family foundation in the Midwest only cares about the fact that children are missing school days? They don't care about the wells. They don't care about the health benefits. They don't care about the parents going to work. That's something that I know because I've gone through this process of taking raw quantitative data, contextualized it into a narrative, taking action with it. But then I in turn documented the knowledge so that it retains and it stays within the context of the organization and can inform future data processes that then turn into information.
And it no longer is living in somebody's individual email.
Exactly. Right. It's not stuck in my head. It's not stuck in my inbox.
And that's the pain point I think that we all have.
Right.
Especially with high turnover.
But it's all too easy and tempting to stop right here at the information stage because we have what we needed, right? We designed the process. We've gone through the cycle. We know what we need to know to take action. Then we do it, but there's 5,000 demands pulling us back to this stage in different directions, in different spaces, in different contexts. And it is important to think about how you're going to take that final step to institutionalizing the learning process and doing the knowledge management, which is a whole domain in and of itself, and one that very few of us have space for in our organizations. So it doesn't have to be deep. It doesn't have to be complex. It can be as simple as I pull the little notes app up on my phone, and every time I have a conversation, I type my notes up, and I send it to somebody else, and I put it into Salesforce. So I've spread the knowledge around the organization, and it's not stuck with me. And in a small organization, it's even more tempting to ignore that step, right? There's only 2 of us in the country. We're going to have a conversation over lunch, so I don't need to worry about it. But that could also inform information for France. And it's not something we would even know because we don't operate in that context on a day-to-day basis. So being able to institutionalize that knowledge really is a key step, and make it easy. Don't make it complicated. You don't have to go get a PhD in knowledge management. I know because I did it.
I would just add with you saying high turnover, I think some of our organizations, like mine, has the opposite, where we have people that have been with the organization for decades.
Yeah.
And so a lot of that has been a process that I started trying to figure out how you document what they know when it wasn't part of the process before. So I think a lot of our founders, like organizations that have founders that were there for a long time, like the directors there for a long time, it's similar.
Right, they've always been there.
They've always been. So you're starting
what happens if they're not?
Right. So you're starting at operating, trying to work back to try to document.
Right, and there you're not going to be able to document every conversation that was had, but capturing the knowledge, like how you capture the essence of what they learned, which relationships are important, why, what decisions they make.
I do want to jump in. We did get a comment from somebody online that they would like some specific challenges. So just so everybody knows, we're going to get into a case study. So that we are addressing that.
Did you have a question?
I was going to ask a very specific question about that idea of we're kind of in that transition of documenting more and more so that we have things out of people's heads and out of people's inboxes. But I'm worried about going too far in that direction of, what if our account pages in our CRM suddenly are like 10 pages long of every email that anybody's ever sent to that person.
So that is a great, but let's say that, let's table that for now, because when we'll try to wrap up our thing in like the next 10 minutes, and then we're going to circle back to what are your challenges.
My favorite is when it gets so complex you need a cover sheet for your cover sheet to explain what's on the cover sheet.
Table of contents for the cover sheet.
Yeah, no, this is a real problem we have faced, because it is very easy to go too deep.
Yeah, then you get back to the data. Then you're just in data.
Right, you're in data overload. And you can't actually convert it to information because you don't know which pieces you have to extract to contextualize.
Most people in your organization don't care or like or know about data. They're there for the mission.
Yeah.
It's not a bunch of statisticians. Okay, let's go through these and.
Sorry, 1 second. I have an online question.
Well, can you just give me the next bullet point?
I can as soon as I. There. Oop,
yeah,
too far.
Fine. So part of why the Holy Grail fully integrated system doesn't exist is because everybody along the chain in your organization interacts with the system in a different way for a different purpose. Okay? So they have very different incentive structures, and what they want to optimize is very different. And you can't optimize all the variables at the same time. Oftentimes when you optimize, our Nicaraguan team would love the system to just be in Spanish. It's like, okay, well, that's optimizing for their need, and that might de-optimize something in the U.S. office if
such as a U.S. director that doesn't speak Spanish.
So every time you optimize some variable, oftentimes it loosens up, it jiggles at other variables in other places, and that's just the way it is. So that's why you can't have one system that's just perfect for everybody, right? Everybody hates their administrative systems. And correct me if I'm wrong. If you love your accounting system, shout it out
and get out.
Actually, I do like
all right, go on. I knew you were going to raise your hand. I knew. Okay, so there are rare exceptions, but if you walk throughout the organization and ask everybody, on average, it's very, very rare. Almost everybody hates their system because it's a good enough system that is trying to optimize across all these different variables, across totally different stakeholders from different backgrounds who want different things. Okay, we talked about that last point. Yeah, and then last thing here, and this comes straight out of our experience. Oftentimes when you have talent gaps in your organization, you're tempted to think, well, if I just had this software tool, right? You have somebody who doesn't really understand the fundamentals of project management, but if I just got the Microsoft project, then they'd be all over it, right? That never works, right? A good tool helps a competent person do a great job. But if they don't have the competency, you don't have it in your organization, or they don't have it as an individual, throwing a tool on them just overwhelms them, frustrates them, sets expectations they can't meet, and hides the problem, which is either them or the training of them in that particular role. We faced this in our organization where for several years we were just tempted to technical interventions, try to get more software solution, and then no, we have to do deeper staff training. That was the fundamental issue. Okay, this we're gonna say we'll come back to this one when we're having our conversation all together as sort of a background. We're just mapping out some administrative areas, could be some pain points that you have to maybe trigger some thinking. Dimensions, not exhaustive lists, but some of the things that we think about, and then solution choices, things like integrated solutions versus siloed, local tech solutions versus cloud-based solutions. So just to circle back to this to prompt some conversation. But the last thing that we want to cover for our own organization is the evolution of our accounting system. And it's not a glory story. I mean, this is like battle in the trenches, getting off on the wrong foot, making progress, backsliding, So, like I said at the beginning, we're not presenting, there's no prescriptive solutions here. We don't pretend to have figured this all out. But we have stayed at it. We have evolved our understanding and gotten a lot better at these things. We literally, and we have these three jurisdictions, right? We have Nicaragua, we have the United States, and we have France. So right off the bat, our accounting is complicated, very complicated. We work in 3 currencies every day. We work in 3 languages every day. French, Spanish, and English. Cordobas, euros, dollars. it's a complicated landscape. And 13, 14 years ago, there were no cheap accounting software solutions that could handle that. Multi-currency, for example, was a feature that was very rarely available 14 years ago. Only the expensive systems had it. The ability to switch languages, have your chart account in multiple languages, for example. Only fancy systems had that. So in the beginning, it was just overwhelming. You're just paralyzed. The shoebox, right? That was good enough at that time. Small grants, we could figure out in Excel. We could just literally stacks of receipts and just process it on the go, right? That was a good enough solution, but we quickly outgrew that. We needed something more organized. You can't really report very well from, 50 different spreadsheets and, a bunch of hard copies of paper. So then we moved into Excel. I actually spent a significant amount of time in our first couple of years developing an Excel system that would be able to track all three of our accounts.
Exactly what your executive director should be doing.
Yeah, which in hindsight was not a good use of my time and energy, but that was the best path I could see at the time. And then next step was we really split off. France went its own way. France started getting audited. They brought in a consultant in France to make sure that they were compliant with everything. They broke off with their own system, said, okay, as long as you submit reports in this format, this information, you can take it away. And that was a good decision on our part. It was hard because I wanted it all to be integrated. I wanted us all to be together. But it was much easier, actually, and much more effective to just define the boundary, the system boundary, and say, okay, this is going to be siloed. Siloed in this case is better. Let France do their own thing in French, in euros, with the French auditor for French compliance, and just submit the information we need in dollars in this format.
Yeah, I don't interrupt the flow of what you're saying, but I just want to be clear, are the funds separate? So the system can be separate, or do you have to integrate back at some point?
The funds are separate. There's separate bank accounts, separate PayPal, separate. There's also the issue of tax deductibility. It's a huge one. Yeah. Right. So a French person wants to donate through France. Right. So they have this. You have to have a separate PayPal that goes to France. So we let them again break that off, but with defined parameters, and that's worked very well. So they went their own way.
And in very rare instances, it is reintegrated in a manual way for a very specific narrow audience, namely the board of directors.
Right. When I report to the International Board of Directors quarterly, I have to produce global consolidated statements. Okay, and there's, to not get too down into the weeds there, but there's a lot of manual adjustments. Issues of cash versus accrual. France has different rules for how you recognize revenues, back out certain things, add in other things. That's the fun part of my job. So France went off and did their thing. What we still wanted to keep the US and Nicaragua together in an integrated system because we have to report in an integrated way to the IRS. We had a very strong incentive to keep those two systems together. So we got a donated license from NetSuite. Has anybody ever used NetSuite? Okay. Super powerful ERPs. It's like higher than a C. It's like an enterprise resource planning system.
It's what Disney uses.
It's accounting, HR, inventory. Huge mistake. I learned later. Again, this was me.
Had a lot of features.
This was me thinking with my background, it's like, this is awesome. This can do everything. This is going to be fully integrated, right? Total disaster. We pushed it for a couple years. The Spanish integration was weak. It had multi-currency, so that part worked very well. Actually worked very well for reporting. But it was the staff. It was bad internet connection, staff that had limited capabilities with computers, and it's a pretty sophisticated system, and the language. It was just difficult, and the training. Mm-hmm. So we trained, but it was difficult to get their skill level up high enough to use any of the features effectively. So a couple years into NetSuite, and I'm going to wrap up here in 2 minutes. A couple years into NetSuite, we offered the finance and accounting team in Nicaragua the option of going a different way if they wanted to. Again, going counter to the Holy Grail. It's like one more siloing.
I would add one piece to this, why this happened at this particular moment as well, in that our in-country finance director, who began with us as an intern at about this stage, had finally reached the stage of professional maturity and development, where she was able to be empowered to make that decision semi-autonomously with guidance. But to have given that choice to the field earlier could have potentially had catastrophic effects because there was technical gaps, just in understanding of what the computer software even meant and how it worked. So how to do that evaluation of that decision-making process would not have gone successfully.
Yeah, that was critical. That was critical because we built our finance and accounting team in Nicaragua really from scratch. I mean, we're in a very remote part of Nicaragua. School education system, not very strong. So people come out of school in administration or accounting and aren't quite sure what a debit and credit is. And so we brought this woman in about 9 years ago as an intern. She was still a student. And we spent years of intensive support and training. We brought in a guy from Google Finance who wanted to move in the nonprofit sector, spent 2 years with us. Brought another finance expert. And these guys were spending months at a time with her every day, all day. Basically putting her back through school. And building her talent and capability up. So interestingly, when we came to this decision point, we actually lost our guy from Google Finance because he disagreed with the strategy of letting them make their own decision and allowing them to break off from the silo. We said that's ridiculous, it's going backwards. We said it's important for local empowerment. We want that now that the accounting finance team is capable, before they weren't, now they are, it's time to let them make a decision. And I didn't like the decision either, but I had already said I would let them make the decision. And they chose to go to a custom-built Nicaraguan system, supposedly for nonprofits.
It's made in Microsoft Access, I discovered.
All sorts of problems. It was built on Microsoft Access. It was local, not in the cloud. Backup was sketchy. But they loved it, and they could get tech support in Managua. They said, the capital city. I said, okay. It says, you own this decision. In hindsight, disaster for them. It ended up costing them 3 times the work to produce a project report and whatever. In part because they didn't understand what questions they needed to ask about the features. So they loved what they heard. And I prompted them with all sorts of extra questions, but they didn't necessarily understand the answers either and what the implications were. So they learned, I mean, they made it work. They made it work, but the hard way. And then about a year later, after they made their transition, we decided on the US side to abandon NetSuite altogether. Super powerful system, could do so much cool stuff, and we just didn't have the capability to keep up with it. So we stepped out of it and went to Zero, a very, very simple, very basic system for the US side, because we don't have a lot of transactions in the US. Almost all of our complexity is in Nicaragua. That's where the accounting gets very tricky. And then about a year ago, they started begging us to help them reconsider their decision to be in this Nicaraguan system. Long story short, we ended up with QuickBooks, which is where we probably should have started in the beginning, although QuickBooks did not have multi-currency back then, it does now. So that was
QuickBooks Online.
QuickBooks Online. So that was one major constraint. I didn't feel we could have picked QuickBooks at the beginning, but it became a viable solution. We went to QuickBooks. They're extremely happy.
So are you guys in QuickBooks still?
We're in Zero.
Yeah,
so
we're in
now
Zero.
there's a new question.
Right.
Should we integrate? You're like, are we seriously having, my wife was like, are you seriously talking about this again? Like, I don't want to hear about it. You've been like upgrading your accounting systems like the last
Are you
12 years.
leaning towards it?
No,
Andrew?
we're not. And the reason is, I've rebuilt Zero twice now. I've scrapped it and rebuilt it, and I just rebuilt QuickBooks in Nicaragua in partnership with our finance team. For our use case, Zero is fantastic. Again, not super powerful. I can't do a lot of in-depth reporting and segmentation, but we have maybe 300 transactions a month on the high end. And most of that is income. And for being a highly mobile office, the ability to manage this, I can do 90% of my work on my phone. So it doesn't matter where I am, what I'm doing. I have not hit a limitation for the software for the level of complexity that we need. And there is no advantage to moving to QuickBooks for the flow up of information, because we are intentionally keeping the 2 countries segmented and siloed. So the fundamental advantage, the fact that I just rebuilt Zero 6 months ago, I'm not doing it again. Is really what it boils down to.
So that's sort of our long, torturous process, but we're pretty happy with the solution that we have now. And it's working. We're getting the data out that we need. I can make my consolidated reports. it's working. So we might let it be for a while.
Mhm.
But I think we'll end there. And we take a little break. Should we take a little 5-minute break and get coffee, and you can prepare your questions, your angsts. Doctor.
So when you say the 1.3 million budget, that's across the board.
Yeah.
Is a lot of that in
Something on the order of 600,000 roughly, about 4 coming out of France. But part of what we have to do in the consolidation is part of the manual stuff is backing out revenue because France will report to the French government and expense when the money is transferred into but we view that as an internal transfer within the organization. So I have to manually back that out. And back out, and Nicaragua will book it as revenue because the auditor said we've got cash flowing in from somewhere, so that's revenue. Say, okay, fine, revenue, but then back it out. But in terms of, we credit the segment, the origin of the relationship with money. So a lot of the French funding, like EDF, it also orders, but they will only give to French organizations. So money will go to France and get transferred over. Yeah.
So it doesn't ever come from France to us.
No,
That's
you will not find a French board member
right.
allow
But
1 penny of euro
but it's one of the reasons
to go to
it's
an American organization.
but that's one of the reasons it's simpler potentially for your US account.
Right.
Because you're only flowing money.
And most of our project funding either comes directly in Nicaragua, like we execute US entities through global communities out of Washington DC, but through their national office in Nicaragua, and it goes straight to Nicaragua. It doesn't come through the US. Even though it's US origin money. So the US mostly sees unrestricted revenue, revenue from our global leadership program, and a few small projects. I'm going to get a little more.
It's hard to, I mean, it's we want to go where
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, we'll be sending out the recording and the slide deck as well.
Yeah, I've been meeting after this because we're going through some like communication things at our headquarters, and we're like, so I think our organizations have similar structures. So our CEO is on maternity leave, so we've been trying to figure out like what does life look like without so this is perfect time.
Wonderful.
Where are you guys located in Nicaragua?
Bluefields.
Bluefields is what the.
It's on the Caribbean side.
Okay.
Well, we've come a long way. 14 years. Maybe.
We have a small office in Managua in the
You
capital.
can't help
But
but
it's more.
bumble upon something.
It's mostly about interfacing with government agencies. There's one person and a driver.
No. It's different systems. So we use.
Oh, we're out.
It's called
Our customer relationship manager.
Yeah. North a little bit.
So we've done some customization.
Yeah, I leave from Managua here in about
But
8
a lot
hours.
of, like, you got an early Salesforce license like NetSuite. It's so powerful.
Yeah, that was insane. I was just down there a couple weeks ago and saw it coming in. I'm like, oh, we must be flying over the volcano. No, it's just a fire.
Treated all the way to zero.
Like right next to the airport. It's crazy. They're taking the whole land of fire and water a little too serious.
Yeah, it can do that, but do we have the capacity to make it do that?
This trip is just 2 weeks. I spend between a quarter and a third of the year in the field. This is just a quick, unscheduled. I'm escorting some guests down and helping them get settled, and then I'm supposed to be on vacation, so I'm flying over to Europe from Managua. Okay, so looks like we are going to gather back up. Those of you that are online, I'm going to unmute you, so feel free to jump in.
Nothing's really.
I don't think we need it yet, but it's good to know.
Okay, so everybody online is unmuted, so hopefully they will just jump in if they want to say something.
So yeah, our thought for the second half was to just make it much more of a conversation. Questions, but also you've got a problem you want to put out there. Go for it. Yeah, we can pick yours up that we tabled earlier.
Yeah.
You want to repeat it loud?
Yeah, I was just asking about, like for our CRM, we're trying to combat the problem of, a founder who's been around since the beginning of the organization, holds most of our donor relationships in her head and in her email, and transferring that information to our CRM through notes of every interaction. But we're starting to get account pages with 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 different notes for every email that's sent back and forth, and I'm wondering, 3 years from now, are we going to have just indecipherable account pages with what's actually important to know about the relationship with this donor?
Mm-hmm.
So now you're currently tracking all the back and forth with those accounts. Those are each being logged in the system.
I wouldn't say each. I mean, we're just trying to be better about if something, we're trying to have it be like if something material happens, you copy the relevant part of that email into a note in the account. But it's not something that's happening automatically. It's not like every email's just automatically going to their account.
And what are you using for your CRM?
Neon CRM.
I've heard of that one.
It's actually pretty great. I love it.
Okay.
But yeah, you have to input your own notes into that system, and so we're trying to be better about keeping, getting the critical information. But at what point does it become information overload?
Yeah, that's a key question.
And Trina, can you tell us which organization you're with and a little bit about just like the one sentence?
Yeah, Lisa and I are both with Health and Harmony. We're a nonprofit here in Portland that works with a group of communities around a rainforest in Borneo to protect that rainforest through some innovative solutions like healthcare and alternative livelihoods in countries.
Great.
Yeah, I mean, my general view on like historic transactional information is that it's always much more of a pain. You're always disappointed because of the amount of effort it takes to bring that information into a new system, either from a legacy system. And legacy system can mean pieces of paper, emails, whatever. That legacy transaction information is really, it's better just to leave it dead where it was and to just do a synthesis. So to sit down with your longtime founder, CEO, whatever, and get the one-page version. Like, how long have you known this person? What are the major interactions that we have had? What do I need to be looking out for? What are the risks? Kind of thing. And then put that in like the description or as in one note. And then going forward, now what we do, so I would do that for moving legacy information in. What we do then is we do track every transaction, but it's an automated feature. So in Salesforce, they have a thing called BCC to Salesforce. So, it's I wouldn't say we track every transaction. It's when you receive an email from an important relationship, you decide, is this something that if a new employee came in 2 years from now that they might want to know about? And if yes, then you can forward it to BCC. And when you're sending it out, if you're just like, hey, I'll call you in 5 minutes, like you don't need to BCC that one because that leads to the overload. So there's some discretion there of what's material in real time. But being able to have some systems have that feature where you can get the information into the system automatically through your email and other mechanisms.
I'm actually interested to hear that you like that feature. We have that BCC feature, but we've used it just very limited. We typically do like a copy and paste just so it can be like, this part of this email.
Right.
Kind of thing.
Is there a search engine within that? I mean,
Oh,
like
yeah.
like a keyword.
Yeah,
because you
there
don't
is
wanna
now.
search through- Okay.
In
There is,
Salesforce.
and and you can export your conversation history into Excel, for example, if you want to do any sort of manipulation around dates, like how frequently you've been in contact. There's all sorts of, again, you can go down a rabbit hole there of how much you want to do. Now, your way can be fantastic. I mean, because you're doing some of the vetting in real time. You're saying, here's a whole email, there's a material piece of it, I'm going to copy just that piece. That's one way to do it. The other thing you could do is an annual sit down and everybody's who's had contact with this person is trying to say, what's the three most important things that happened over the last year, and then keep the entire transaction record, current transaction record in the system. But you don't go back to that unless you like, what did they say on that one day about, they said they really loved this and really hate this. You want to make sure you got them in the right way.
So
Yeah, if you're about to serve them coffee, and so that might not be something that you thought was material at the time.
Yeah.
There might be value in having that deep in some archive that is retrievable if needed, but 99% of the time it won't be.
So I personally am a big fan of the verbatim. So I tend to take exceedingly detailed notes in a call. Like, I mean, I almost type the exact word for word sometimes, but I also summarize. So I do record that and I file that away because somebody, or I might forget. I have the attention span of a ferret sometimes. I just forget. So I like to be able to go back and look, for me, language is important. So I want to know what word did they use to describe that, because that could influence my future communication and engagement with them. So I do record all of that, but not in the primary public space. So I record those details for the relationships that I own in a space that I own, but is available to other people. And then in the public exchange in the system where other people might need to access that, I always make sure that there's a short, succinct summary. And so we kind of balance the two systems because we both have different note-taking styles. So his note-taking style frustrates me sometimes. So, when it's a relationship that he owns, we have a shared system of summation that we can always find the relevant information quickly and efficiently. But for the relationships that we own individually, we're able to track in a way that makes sense for us, but still maintains the knowledge for the organization.
How many employees do you guys have
We're about 55.
throughout?
Yeah.
Three.
Throughout the three.
And are Nicaragua employees, are they American? Are they all? I mean, do you have a mix?
It's about 80% Nicaragua. So it's about 38 Nicaraguan and about 9 international staff.
And I'm only asking because we're sort of looking at replication, and we're going to have U.S. employees living in that, and that's sort of the admin and HR person, insurance and managing taxes. How that? I mean, we might not be in that conversation today, but that's sort of what's on my mind right now, like thinking globally on how to manage employees and get them branched out into those international platforms.
Yeah, it's really challenging because there's the issues of how do you treat people like humans, right, and take care of your people regardless of the laws. And it's like, how do you take care of people is one challenge. Then what is your obligations of compliance under the local jurisdiction? What are your compliance obligations in home country, United States, for example? Workers' comp, insurance, healthcare. I mean,
and how much is just good enough?
And and that there's no better place than how much is good enough. We really stress that how do we get clear on how we take care of people, and we're not saying we're there yet. We're always doing a great job of that, but we prioritize thinking about that. And on the compliance side, it's often like you do the best you can, and if somebody pushes back, then we'll make an adjustment. especially in jurisdictions like Nicaragua and so many countries in the world, you cannot get a clear answer. We have hired lawyers, we have gone to government office. I mean, you can't get a clear answer. There are no, it's unknowable. So to a certain extent, and oftentimes a lot of countries, the bureaucracy is somewhat arbitrary and it's relationship based. So if you feel that you're in good relation and nobody's pushing on you on a particular issue, then how far is good enough? Because you can hire as many lawyers as you want, and hire a firm to handle this and that, and you still can't get a clear answer of whether you're compliant or not. So we've always been very transparent about that, and we get audited by the Ministry of Labor, and they come into our offices in Nicaragua, and always pass with flying colors in terms of them not being able to find that we're out of compliance on certain things, but more can confirm that we're in compliance on other things. But it seems to be good enough. And on the U.S. side, it's similar with the IRS. It's tricky. Like, do minimum wage laws apply if their home country's here, if they work in a foreign country? What kind of visas can they be working on? What are their tax filing obligations in the U.S.? We've researched a lot of those questions. We feel we have something that works, but I can't share it with you as a best practice because I don't know. It's good enough for now, it seems. But we do have that issue. We have French people on payroll in Nicaragua, British people on payroll, American people on payroll in Nicaragua.
How big is your accounting team?
6 now, isn't it?
The accounting team, yeah. So on the French side, we have a volunteer who's been with us for 10 years, who manages it himself, and then a hired auditor comes in. They don't have that many transactions in France. On the U.S. side, it's one of Andrew's jobs, so it's, how would you say, 20-30% of your time, roughly.
Roughly.
In that ballpark. And then in Nicaragua, it's a team of 4 that are, it's accounting and finance and some human resource compliance work to make sure the contracts are legal so that they can be on payroll, all of that stuff. And taxes are incredibly complicated.
And just cash. It's a cash-based economy. So
Cash-based economy and like sales tax. When you buy something, you have to withhold sales tax, addition to vendor, and all this crazy stuff, which is not uncommon in the world. It makes you really appreciate it. Much as we love to complain about the United States, it makes you appreciate how efficient many things
Still
are.
not that bad.
How many things are actually very efficient here.
I met there, so this is very impressive. I used to work for a big company, and this to me is very comprehensive. Let me ask you this: so, is this your system is proprietary, or you share with other nonprofits?
So we don't have one system. We have different systems for this, and it's a mix of off-the-shelf stuff and then a lot of stuff that we have built. Most of the stuff that we have built that's still current and being used today is in Excel. We do have a lot of, I think, pretty sophisticated models in Excel for planning, to support budgeting, to do a lot of the impact monitoring and M&E. A lot of that is still in Excel, and I think is going to remain that way for the future. We are happy to share that stuff. So we really view ourselves as open source type organization willing to share. We've learned a lot over the years from getting template. I mean, how do you run one-on-one management meetings across countries? We have a good template for that. It's super simple. But it works well. It tracks your action items, map out your agenda, action items to be followed up on next time. Just basic stuff like that. We have a lot of tools. In terms of the software systems, I would just say really quickly what we have. So currently we have Xero is what we're using on the US side, and QuickBooks Online Spanish on the Nicaragua side. The CRM, the customer relationship management, we use Salesforce. We have a nonprofit license from Salesforce, a donated license. We started using that in 2007 before they had a foundation. They're one of the first donations that they made. And the monitoring and evaluation, again, we're largely in Excel, Google Sheets, but we do also use Carto. It's called CartoDB. It's a visualization software to map out all of our installations.
Is that with a C, Carto?
Yeah, CARTO. And they also have a nonprofit license. It's a very nice visualization, would help your organization where you've worked, where you've installed things. We use it for maintenance support and future planning. Talent management is very much the basics. We have, my contracts in Microsoft Word archived, and that's nothing fancy there.
We do for all of our US-based payroll, we use Gusto, which used to be ZenWorks.
Yeah. Gusto integrates with.
And I literally spend about 2 minutes a month on payroll.
Yeah,
it's a fantastic solution.
Yeah, that's been a huge help.
And that integrates with Salesforce
and Xero. Yeah, it integrates pretty much cross-platform.
Not integrated it with Salesforce.
Yeah, Salesforce is siloed from account. Well, I should rephrase that. Accounting is siloed. Accounting and payroll are siloed together intentionally. So I double enter. Anytime we get a donation, I double enter into Salesforce and into the accounting system.
And that was a choice.
It was intentional.
Keep the accounting pure, separate. You would love to be able to see that information when you're in the CRM, but we don't want the CRM touching the accounting information.
And I do all of my tax receipts out of the CRM. I do it out of Salesforce. I don't do it in accounting because I don't want accounting to have outward or inward bound communications. Again, mostly for security.
Controls thing.
Yeah, it's a controls thing. Communications. So, and this touches on a broader issue. We're on the Google Apps platform, which also has a nonprofit license. So I was mentioning earlier, the good news is now, it's not 14 years ago, now there's a lot of great solutions. Google Apps, we're very happy with it. Of course,
they call it G Suite
still curse
now.
at it sometimes, but it's it's powerful, easy to do basic administration. So all of our email, every time somebody comes in, gets an account, that's critical to have an institutional email system, because if somebody leaves the organization and you don't have a great CRM system, they've got all this information in their email that you need access to. It's critical for security. You have people who leave the organization disgruntled or with a grudge or whatever, that you can control access to their account.
This is the one system, by the way, that is transversal across all segments of the organization. So France is on this as well.
France, Nicaragua.
How many people are on G Suite versus Exchange? Okay, look at Team Drives. It's a new feature that they're rolling out. It's in beta right now, and you can activate it. This is just a good case study. One of the challenges that we face is that we use Team Drive because, again, multinational, it's all decentralized. But the individual that creates the document or the folder owns that, has the ownership permissions. And when they leave, it's almost impossible to change the ownership. So we have a bunch of legacy accounts of staff members that have left that we had to leave active. So Team Drives, so where you have your My Drive, you will now be able to create Team Drives for specific projects, and they are owned by the organization. Doesn't matter who contributes, and you have much better sharing control. So you can create where staff members can't delete files. They can add files and they can move things. They can't delete anything. But everything is owned and maintained by the organization itself, and you don't have space limitations. So if you're spending money for data storage on the nonprofit license, moving everything over to a Team Drive will get rid of that expense. I'm excited.
You just geeked out hard.
You have no idea.
You were so excited, your eyes got red.
I do.
Knowledge management, very linked communications. We do not have a sophisticated knowledge management platform. It's a dream of mine with a time horizon of 5 to 10 years. We'd love to be able to have one. We do have a good document archiving system. We have an intranet. It's the Google Drive system that he's just referring to. It's part of the G Suite solution. So I'd say we have archiving, but real knowledge management, you have to have tagging and good lookup functionality and all this stuff, which that does not have. But we don't need it for now. It would be a nice to have.
Do you guys have any systems around, this probably isn't a tech solution, but any systems around file structures and where documents go? Just systems around, if you create this kind of financial report, that it's stored.
We have so many of those. So a few comments on that. Number one is, just like nobody loves their administrative systems except a few people, no two people will like the same file structure, because we're used to, up until very recent history, the file structure was always on your computer, and it's the way that you organize your brain. So if you're a chronological thinker, if you're like, oh, what was I doing in May? Then you want a folder that goes by May, June, July, but somebody else is very geography oriented. They go, well, I was in this community, so all the files related to that community, that should be the top level of the folder hierarchy. So the short answer is you will never find two people who think, oh, these two people in the same file structure and be like, this is great. Never. Never, ever, ever, ever. So intranets, people hate their intranets, always. About 10 years ago, there was a movement to do away with file structures. And Salesforce was leading this. There was a company called Coral. Salesforce actually bought up to kind of introduce the idea of a folderless intranet, where it's a pool and you use tags. Because the reason why two people will look at a file structure and disagree, somebody's thinking about a geography tag, like, oh, Portland's really what's important. The other person's thinking, no, May is what's important. The other person's thinking, no, the fact that it was a workshop, that's what's important. Well, in a pool, you can just put those three tags, the Portland, May, workshop, and then you can look it up. So that was the vision, the dream. But it largely failed because it requires a lot of thinking. You're like, oh gosh, and what tag should I use? And then the problem is somebody would spell Portland and somebody would forget the O, and so it'd be misspelled, and so there'd be 8 ways to spell Portland. And then, so you're going to look up the documents to retrieve them, you type in Portland, you have to find the right one because it's misspelled. It ended up being a great theory, but it doesn't work well. So people are mostly back to file structures that they hate.
And I will comment particularly for those that are in G Suite, and this is true with Microsoft's, what are they calling it now? It's not SharePoint, but their OneDrive. So both of these are kind of a hybridized system where on the back end of things, like on Google's end, it is actually completely not organized. It is all tag based, and so when you'll notice the searching algorithms, for example, really do drive that. What is nice is as you share documents to different users, they do actually have the ability to restructure the folder, but it's only on their end. So you can put the same file in multiple locations, for example. So every individual user, my Google Drive looks very different from his Google Drive because I've reorganized all of the files that have been shared to me into a logic that makes sense, but the original source is still in its original location.
So this is the new hybrid. It went from strict folder hierarchies to total blob, everybody hated it, to a virtual folder hierarchy that's actually a blob, but presents itself as a folder structure, how you choose to organize it. Now, almost nobody knows how to use that yet. The feature's very hidden. You gotta hold like Alt and something weird, right click, and so it's there, but nobody's using it, and it's not well understood yet. But we're excited about it.
Right. Like if you're like, oh well, I get rid of this, but it's actually shared in multiple files, then also it's not.
Right, exactly. And you know, I mean, this gets also into the working across national cultures as well. I mean, if you're in a rigid hierarchical culture, you should probably have a rigid hierarchical folder structure. It just makes sense. So even just trying to explain, you know, I've never explained to our Nicaraguan staff the fact, even our IT person, that you can, by the way, just reorganize the files and it doesn't move them, because that will make zero sense.
And it'll drive them crazy.
Well, there's that as well, especially our country director.
I wanted to take the conversation a little bit of a different direction. So your Nicaraguan program is your longest program. You guys are also doing work in Ethiopia now, is that right?
Yeah.
And so talking about how what the process has been like to start working in a new country. So not necessarily the programmatic side, but what considerations you had from an administrative perspective about making that move and how does that work and what you've done.
So I would say that we have learned a lot of lessons in the last 14 years, and we're taking it slow and trying to keep it as simple as possible. So rather than try to roll out some major big thing, it's like, what's the bare minimum we need to take the next step, has been our approach for Ethiopia, leveraging all the learning we did in Nicaragua. It's a very different circumstance. In Ethiopia, we're working with a national nonprofit organization that's been operating for 25 years. Out of Addis Ababa, they have offices in different cities in Ethiopia. Great organization. What we're doing with them is they've been working with marginalized women and children, doing economic development, education, and some water programs. But they wanted to add an energy component. So we came in, and we've been visiting them and getting to know them over sort of a 2-year period. And then we formed a partnership agreement between the two of us and Electricité de France out of France, a big energy company. to help incubate an energy program within their existing organization. So it's a very different circumstance in the sense that it's a partnership accountability agreement, but we don't have any command and control. We can't go in and say, okay, you're implementing this kind of system. They already have compliance. They already have legal compliance. They already have lawyers. They already have, to be fair, not very sophisticated on a lot of those. So we've run into hiccups where you're getting official emails that are coming in from this person's personal Yahoo account. You know, like, ooh, we don't like to work that way. Like, we want that to be an official account. But we've come up against issues, so we have a full-time staff member embedded in their organization in Addis Ababa. That's a brand new structure for us. And there's a big branding issue, branding and administrative integration issue that the conversation's ongoing. They just had a transition in their executive director, so we're picking the conversation back up. But they are a blueEnergy staff member, paid and on payroll in France. So they're a blueEnergy technician. But when they go out into a local community, part of the whole benefit for us is that we're embedded in their community engagement structure. But so you can't go out to the community and say, oh, this is a blueEnergy technician. No, this is a Mismido technician. It's how they present this person externally. But there's been questions about when they email the mayor of this town about this project, what email address should they be using? And what title should they have? And who should be having access? If they email a project proposal document out, how is that getting archived in the blueEnergy system? So I'd say it's an ongoing negotiation. I mean, we've already been executing projects with them for 2 years. Things are flying around in Yahoo. We've created a section in our intranet for Ethiopia-specific things. We're sort of manually keeping it all together for now, because that's good enough. But I'm not satisfied with the way that it's currently structured. But we don't have an answer yet for how. So what I decided was we did set up a G Suite account for him so that he has access to our archives and our intranet, our forms. And when I email him, I email his Mismido, which is the local partner, email address, but I also carbon copy his blueEnergy account, and then I BCC to Salesforce. So anything I send out to him comes back into the blueEnergy system. And anything he sends to me from Mismido, any project proposals stuff, I'm manually uploading to the intranet. So that's how we're juggling that for now.
And then, so just going back a little bit to the structure, you have an MOU with this other organization,
yeah.
And so your employee that is embedded in the local organization goes by your organization's administrative policies, HR policies. How do you sort of handle, and then who's actually the boss of this employee?
Well, this is one of those ones. There's no easy answer. We have a strict code of conduct that governs things like dress code and just a lot of stuff. There's a lot of issues when international people are working in other countries. So he has to adhere to our code of conduct. So those sort of HR basic structures, he is obligated to those. But in addition, he has to respect local norms. And things around like work hours and working on weekend. I mean, there's different cultural norms for those things. And it's sort of, when an issue comes up, it's sort of negotiated on a one-off basis for now. But it's tricky. I mean, the whole issue of having an employee that's embedded in other organizations, there's no easy answer because it's just a complex situation. There's two supervisor lines. Right? So we have the supervisor of that partnership is in the Paris office. So that's the person he is the hard line, the hard HR line is to the blueEnergy France office. But the operational line, what time does he need to show up to work, what site does he need to report to, who's approving the project proposal ultimately, is his local it's the executive director of the local nonprofit. And and disagreements arise where they want to approve this budget, and we say, well, if we approve that budget, we're not going to be able to take it to the funding partner. Then there's a negotiation.
I'll just say that's Green Empowerment's model in all the countries that we
work in.
because
we're great. That's your normal
That's our
operating
normal.
procedure.
And so while it's challenging for those reasons, you then are not setting up your own entity in the country.
Right.
So that's one of the reasons that Green Empowerment has been able to expand to other countries using that model and using kind of like a fellowship approach, and they kind of spend a year to figure out if that partnership's going to work, and then we can make them kind of.
Do you have a hard HR line back to Portland?
Yeah, they are Portland employees, and in our MOU, they're treated much more like a consultant to the partner organization, not staff members. So
Right.
they are brought in on specific partnership support.
Right.
And the MOU is kind of more about what does Green Empowerment bring to the table as an organization, and this is our representative versus being maybe a technician on a project, I guess is a little.
So as a consultant, they wouldn't have any decision-making authority, right? So
Right,
they're
and so it's all
advising, yeah.
about partnership, and that's our true model, is
Yeah.
about how we support our partners to do the work, so it makes sense. We definitely do run into a lot of those same challenges, but we're not then dealing with the local entity, legalization, taxes,
Right.
those types of things.
Oh yeah, I think it's a trade-off well worth it, because we've been told in Ethiopia to open take 4 to 5 years. I mean, it's extremely complicated.
And depends on our partner agreements, like in Nicaragua, where we've been operating for 20 years now, that's been our model, and the host partner, they're not working 100% with them, but they are the one that's hosting them on the visa. But we work with other partners, and that is part of our partnership agreement. It's not that we're working with them full time either.
Right.
But they are.
So that's slightly different for us. I mean, our guy in Addis Ababa is 100% embedded.
Which was kind of Caitlin's background, but yeah. So those are all things that you kind of can sort out, but we're facing the opposite. That's our model, and then we have a Philippines representative office, and it's awesome.
Where you actually have your own person.
And our own team. We're Philippines. We're the same as you have set up in Nicaragua.
Right.
And we had to do that for our USAID grant.
Yep.
So, and now, so I'm really prepared. It's like opposite.
Yeah. Coming at it from different, but kind of settling in the middle, where it's a little hybrid. Yeah. It's a little bit of a hybrid.
One is country specific, project specific, need specific, which I think is appropriate and aligns with our values and how we do work. But it just means that you're customizing solutions based on the country and the partnership.
Yeah.
And then funding. And part of it for us is being able to get local Filipino funding as well, right?
Yep.
So I think what would be interesting is to go around the room really quick and maybe each person kind of pick one of these areas that you spend a significant chunk of your time. What are you using and what's your biggest pain point? And how you've calloused that wound to work around it.
To survive.
So
Sure.
I'm going to stand up because I'm like facing everyone backwards. So I'm Amber Wilson, and I'm the Director of Global Operations for Foundation for International Medical Aid for Children. I handle all of our strategic planning for 10 project sites in 9 different countries. And so I worked in the field for them a number of years, and one of the things that I noticed was that our monthly reporting that we did in terms of like our impact that we were making was like a pain, and then nothing ever came of it after like years and years and years of submitting this report every single month. And so then I later came to my boss and was like, let me redo this, because we're doing great things on the ground, but it's not, you don't see anything about it later on. And so we're just really focusing in on impact, and part of that was from the ground up going to each community that we're working in and saying, okay, what do you guys want to focus on? And then how can we turn this into data? And that's what we've been doing the past 2 years, and we're starting to see like real results and progress. So that's been really great. So that's one of the things, kind of just like our overall strategic plan for each of the countries. And every single one is completely different from the last. And then the other part of that is budgeting. And so for the strategic plans, I mean, we use Google Drive and we use Word, the Word document in Google Drive. And then the other part is our budgeting. I also do all of our finance and budgeting for each of the sites. Because we're a medical nonprofit, month to month, we have like a consistent budget pretty much. So it makes it kind of easy to train people up. And that's also in Drive. And then we use like paychecks to pay US hires, and we use like a wire system to pay local hires. We're also mostly local employees. And then something that's been really useful for me in both of those on Drive is that there is a tag feature. And so when I'm like, instead of emailing someone like, can you take a look at this document, I just @ and tag their email and say, what does this line item mean? Or where's your receipt for this? And it just, then they find it, they hit resolve, like no email, it's just done. And so that's been super helpful for us, like, because I know in the field, I'm like, I have to go up a mountain to get to internet. I don't want to answer one more email. And so I've been able to just tag my operations managers, and they've been like, boom, done, no email sent. So that's kind of like what I work on, and that's been a plus of being in the Drive. So, but we're also transitioning to Google Nonprofits as well. So
yeah, look at the team drives; they're exciting. I think you hit on an important point too. It's not just about understanding the, we at the top have our own stressors, and we have a much broader solution portfolio, and sometimes we're solving problems that don't exist further down the chain. And it's important to keep that in mind. I mean, it's, there were stress points in ASIS. We had no idea in our former accounting system in Nicaragua. We knew it took a long time and we never got anything on time, but we didn't really understand the why. And so actually just saying where are the pressure points, and yes, we can introduce some suggestions, but ultimately it's their decision, because they know what they have to produce. Although I now know far more about Nicaraguan accounting practices than I ever wanted to. That's literally the only Spanish I can speak is accounting. But ultimately they drove the process. And I was able to give some broader context to make sure that it was moving up the chain correctly and in a way that was meaningful for us. But ultimately, I mean, by giving them the ability and the resources, yes, it cost us up front at the international level more money to deploy myself, to just physically going down there and the time that I was away and pulled away from other tasks. And that was an upfront cost that we had to decide to carry. But within 1 month of making the transition, we saved 80% workload time in the field staff, because we made that upfront investment to really just give them the support and the sounding board to design the system that worked best for them. Now, that also requires competency and bandwidth and the ability to understand the decision-making framework. So that is, frankly, the highest expense for us in making that transition, for example, was not in purchasing the software and spending, buying the airplane ticket for me to fly down there twice and go through all of those processes. What it really was, it was in the staff time where I spent the time, not even talking about accounting systems, but evaluating the decision-making framework that we were using. And then I have to go do my own evaluation. Do we have enough bandwidth? Turns out our ISP was blocking QuickBooks, so everything was taking 4 times as long initially. So I had to switch over to Google's DNS server. I mean, all of this digging that could have potentially created more complexity, but these are things that aren't necessary for them to have a context or an understanding for in the field, because really all they want to do is produce their monthly reports for USAID faster.
Hi everybody, I'm Andrea with Green Empowerment. Just to give you an idea, we are based in Portland and we're active right now in 8 countries. I was just talking about our partnership model. So I think our challenges right now are around accounting and finance. We have, from just a budget perspective, had a full-time finance manager in the Portland office for the last few years. That's costing quite a bit when it doesn't seem like the work product is as should spend that much budget on that. So we've been looking at bringing on like an accounting service, et cetera. We do use QuickBooks. I have right now a part-time finance manager that's coming in to like enter data and I can pull reports, but most of the other kind of reporting and manipulation happens in Excel outside of QuickBooks. And then for our CRM database, I actually think it can be quite good. I just don't think we're fully optimizing it, but it's little green light. And I use the BCC function quite a bit. I think it's a really helpful thing for our field staff to BCC, because it's very easy for them to then, I know that they're talking, with a funder, for example, that really wants to have a relationship directly with the field staff, but then it's tracked in our system. We also use that to track all of our annual reports, invitations, and mailings. So if I go into somebody's account, I would then know that they got the annual report. So when I say follow up, I say, I'm so glad, I hope you liked the annual report, et cetera. So we do use the BCC function. I think we could get much better at maybe like some best but when you actually BCC, because I think a lot of us just don't, we're like, we don't want to clog it, but some of it could be useful. So, but Little Green Light we've had a lot of success with, and it integrates with MailChimp. So and all of our invites. So we have like conferences internationally that we're hosting, and people actually sign up via Little Green Light, then it goes into our system as well. So we do keep it separate from accounting, like you were saying, for control purposes.
One of the nonprofits that I serve on the board of uses Little Green Light, and it was a huge transition. And it's a good mid-range product because it's pretty customizable, it's adaptable, but it's not overly complex like Salesforce, where you need to spend $100,000 to have a consultant build you something.
Right.
My question is it multilingual? I've never looked that deep in it because it's a US-based nonprofit, so I've never had to think about it. That would be curious. I'd be curious to know when you get a chance, if you could take a look and let me know. I'd appreciate that.
So the BCC function, if somebody replies to the email, like for ours, if we BCC, it'll show that we've sent them an email, but it doesn't show the response. So
at least in Salesforce, you have to forward it then to the BCC when it comes in.
If the response is worth it, then you forward it. Like if it's a proposal, right? So I submit a proposal, I BCC, I get a response back that we got the grant, then I move forward that. Okay.
There are some instances where there are paid-for third-party solutions that will like constantly scan your inbox and pull everything out. I know for Salesforce, it's about $20 a month per user. Again, Edge is the best one for Salesforce. But again, you have to weigh that. Do you really need everything? And do you trust a system to accurately capture it? Because what happens if somebody's emailing you from two different email addresses? It still takes a human touch. Just using BCC blindly does not always capture the information in the right spot.
I will say I wasn't there when this transition happened, but the Empowerment did use Salesforce. They were one of the organizations that got that donation license back in the day. And in 2014, I think it was, made the transition to Little Green Light. So I don't know what decision-making went into it, but I can at least look.
Yeah, we had a huge vision for Salesforce when we got it in 2007.
I think that's
just like the NetSuite thing. Then we scaled it all the way back down to 0. We actually didn't use it, but we could maintain the license. And then now we use it very selectively. And I think we're using it very effectively now, but we're using 5% of its features.
Well, I have costs around that too. What I
So
learned about Salesforce is that it's super customizable, but you have to do the work.
Well, exactly. The nonprofit license is free. The software license is free. But you need, it's the workflow. Like, because it's so complex, so customizable, and we have, for example, for our global leadership program on our webpage, our publicly facing webpage, we have a form that people can fill out if they're interested in getting more information, getting the application. That goes into Salesforce. It's a web to lead, creates a lead in Salesforce. All that's great and super powerful, but you have to write all the workflows, and you have to be clear institutionally, well, where should that information go before you can tell Salesforce where to put it? That you would, even for, I would say at least tens of thousands. It depends on how many features.
It depends on what you're trying to do. If you're just trying to manage your donors, out of the box, the Nonprofit Success Pack.
That's also a new evolution.
Is pretty solid. Like, there's not a whole lot of customization you would need to do. So when you start getting into more complex custom use cases, that if you're not going into it with $100,000, you're wasting your time.
Lisa, I work for Health and Harmony. I think Trina kind of gave you an overview of what we do. I work with Trina on accounting and donor management, but a lot of my focus is sort of, streamlining the office, managing the office, employee support. I think for me, we have a lot of remote employees, so it's gathering, reimbursement receipts and expense reports and trying to find a solution to make that usable for all these different employees and the way their brain works and what's best for them, and to get it to me where the auditing process is not a nightmare. So I kind of, and then also, as I mentioned, we're looking at replicating, hiring employees to maybe work overseas. So a lot of that's kind of in the forefront of my mind, what's the best insurance, what's going to make them happy, and so implementing on kind of all those employee resources to make it all gather to one place effectively, efficiently. That comes across well during an audit. So we're not, what was that? So
the next point. Do you guys have to collect receipts from your field staff, or does all that stay in Nicaragua?
We don't consolidate it to the United States. We have a whole room. It's like a receipt museum. Receipts and contracts and everything's perfectly organized.
Right.
Yeah, no, they just send the audit report up.
So we do have a roadmap to digitize.
That's what
That was part of the QuickBooks transition. That was part of the decision. They finally feel we're there at a space. This was one of my questions. So we've gone completely digital with all of our accounting records after consultation with experts to make sure that that would fit into our compliance requirements. But they feel like that's where they want to go. But it's the transition into QuickBooks. They wanted to jump right into it, and I said don't.
Yeah. That's the roadmap.
It's a change. It's that change management. It's like you can only change so many behaviors at once, and before you have to refreeze those and norm them before you can introduce more change. So we've migrated the team into QuickBooks. Nothing's really changed from a digitization perspective, but they're aware of it, and we're looking at what resources do they need. Is it the scanners are slow? So should we make sure everybody has a smartphone so they can just take a picture? Is that going to? Exactly. So those are questions that we're looking at, and so I've worked with our finance director to think about what questions need to be asked, and it's something that we'll pick it back up in maybe a year or so once we've made sure that adoption and accuracy have all gone smoothly. But that's a huge training curve, particularly in a highly paper-based society and workplace culture.
One of the questions I receive from my clients is what do we do with our receipts? Is it okay to have just electronic, so if we scan it, save it as a PDF, is that acceptable? Or do we need to save both? And I'm in between the worlds. I love paper and I love electronic formats of it. So what do you guys recommend? Or what do you know as far as compliance?
I mean, in Nicaragua, compliance, you have to have the paper.
You have to have the paper.
We want to digitize to be able to have transparency across country boundaries and for backup. What is the supplier? It's like, but they still have to have paper. I mean, Nicaraguan law still dictates that your board meeting minutes have to be taken by hand, and you have to have a handwritten accounting ledger. So, you can move forward to the future, but you also have to be anchored in history. But on the U.S. side,
on the U.S. side, so what we've come to is there's a very unclear ruling by the IRS. Ultimately, is what it boils down to. Surprise, surprise. So the advice that we have been given by experts and various experts in the field, most of them coming from the business school at the U of O, has been that in theory, digital receipts are sufficient. The worst case scenario would be that they would request that you print all of them. Now, again, being a highly mobile, technocentric organization as we are between the two of us, we very rarely have paper receipts because we do almost everything online. So I attach a PDF, and if we ever got audited and they pushed back on us, all I have to do is hit print. The one area that they highly encourage that you maintain paper receipts are on expense reimbursements to employees. So that is the one area that we do maintain paper records. And literally all I do is I just take each of our individual receipts, I staple them together and throw them in a folder. Because I also have the digital records. Again, I do just in the moment, I take a picture and I throw it in an envelope.
Do you organize it by employee name or by trip?
Yeah, so I organize by month. I organize by month and employee. So, and then I put a little sticky note staple, like which employee, which month, which year. Because again, I'm never going to look at them. I count and make sure the right number is there. I make sure that, and then the only other places I keep paper receipts are credit card expenses, like if we go out to lunch, for example. If I get a piece of paper, I keep it. But I don't go out of my way to create more paper, if that makes sense.
How about paper checks from donors?
So I do keep a photocopy of them with a deposit log.
We keep our checks because we just don't like to throw checks away. We actually we scanned them into our bank, but it was just in the anecdotal category, but you never know what's going to be the case with a situation. We had a donor get audited, individual donor, who came to us and said, there isn't any chance that you still have that check that we sent you. And we said, actually, there's a really good chance. They were so grateful because in their audit, they were being asked for the actual checks.
The actual check.
Yes. Not the scanned one that went to the bank or anything, but the actual. They were so grateful.
The bank actually takes our checks.
Yeah, so we do physical ATM deposits, but then they send us a scan of the check, and that's what I save. Again, digital archive.
And part of our controls, like our business controls, we have such a small staff for our donor checks. Somebody opens them and we scan them, and then they're deposited, but we have like the original scan.
We have an original photo.
So yeah, I'm hybridized. I don't have a definitive.
And it will probably come
Like I don't really the credit card receipts that I keep are the ones like again are mostly meals because there's a tip attached to them. If I leave a tip, so the amount would be different on the credit card statement. Right. So I mean and that happens maybe once or twice every 2 months. It's very infrequent, so I keep those, but that's about it. Unless it's an employee expense. And auditors are going to be different.
Auditors for their whole careers have been asking for that.
Right.
There's also this unknown territory. It's like, but is that required? It's like they'll ask for it. It's like, can you say no?
Well, I just end up printing all the stuff that's and they think that's okay.
And it takes so much time to have to print. Like they sit there and are like, hey, can you print this? And then they watch you while you print it.
And then I gotta change that ink again.
Right.
Exactly.
And two, so we attach everything inside of Xero for a US accounting system, and they do have the option where you can email their customer service, and they'll create you a bundled package of all of your attachments for a given window. So that has always been my fallback plan if it happens.
How are we doing on time?
So it's almost 10:30. So I was just going to suggest if you all want to talk a little bit about your organization, what you're doing,
Maybe we'll
and
just
then
listen.
we'll wrap it up.
We'll listen.
Wrap it up. Okay.
I'm Louise Rohr. I'm with CREATE, Center for Renewable Energy and Appropriate Technology for the Environment. We're based in Eugene, and we work in Senegal. And I have two of my colleagues here, Marjorie Bridges, who works with us. She has her own business, so she works with us on bookkeeping and accounting. And Tasha Eisenberg, who was a Peace Corps volunteer in one of our communities, purely by
You said you were in Senegal. I was like, we've got somebody else coming.
Yes, exactly. She was one of our graduates. So the three of us here are associated with CREATE. I work across all the administrative functions, with executive director, founders, so I've kind of seen it from the beginning. I would really endorse the principle of good enough and solve the problem when it comes up, kind of at the scale that's required. That's what we do. We started with Excel for our accounting systems here in Senegal. Our systems are highly integrated, but manually. But we do use QuickBooks. Marjorie helped us get set up with that a few years ago. We now trained our staff in Senegal, so we have Senegal QuickBooks, US QuickBooks. We integrate them for reporting purposes. It works really well. It's been a great way to build the capacity of our staff in Senegal, which is something we really believe in. Our Senegal staff is all Senegalese nationals. So we really want to be able to continue giving them challenges and building their capacity. We use Little Green Light, we use MailChimp, so it sounds like we're all kind of in the same zone with respect to those things. And I've learned about some features of different things that I didn't know about, so that's great. I'll go back and explore those. And I think we're always facing challenges, but just trying to get to the next level of solution that works for everybody and doesn't cause confusion. I think we know when we get beyond the level where we should be with something, when our staff in Senegal when we get radio silence on something, it's like they're confused. Because in their culture, not knowing something is not something you want to acknowledge. So they might pretend like they know when they don't know, or they might just not say anything. And so I spend time when I go there working with our administrative team, kind of checking in on how things are going, how things are looking, and Marjorie was able to kind of help with some refresher training last fall, which was great, and it's been a really good system. So we keep facing challenges, and one of the challenges is growth, but I think we're managing our way through that step by step.
Thanks.
All right, well, this has been, at least for me personally, and I hope for everybody in the room and online, very, very valuable. So thank you so much to blueEnergy for sharing your experience, for being open about those experiences, because not everybody is willing to talk about the challenges that they've faced over time. So, for some of you who came in after we started, I'm Marissa Straley. I'm the coordinator for GlobalPDX. So again, thanks for being here today. I would like to thank Lauren Workman with Propel Insurance who provided our coffee today, and just give her a minute to say a few words.
Hey, coffee. Hey, I worked in nonprofits and know the importance of caffeine to our causes. So my name is Lauren Forden. I am the nonprofit practice lead for Propel Insurance, which is a brokerage here locally in Portland. We are actually based out of Tacoma, but we have a Portland office down on Pioneer Square. I actually have spent 10 years of my life on the other side, on your side of the desk with nonprofits. When I moved to Portland about a year ago, I took a position in the for-profit sector, but I was very clear about what I wanted to work for and with nonprofits. I know how important managing our overhead is and managing risk and retention is for nonprofits, especially on the international side. As I listened to us talking about things like employees walking off with codes and what that can do to a business, and wondering about international work comp laws. That's my bread and butter. What I do every day, day in, day out. I work heavily with small and medium-sized nonprofits because oftentimes the larger nonprofits don't really need that much attention. What needs to happen is working with the small nonprofits who oftentimes just get looked over by those in the for-profit sector. So if you do have any questions, I don't need to work on your business, I don't need to be your broker, but I am here to help you. So if you ever need to call me, or if you have questions about international work comp laws, if you have questions about employee benefits, if you have questions about kidnapping ransom, directors and officers, which is a big question these days, I am happy to answer. I have my card, so it has my phone number, my email address, and I'm here to partner with you. So thank you very much.
So just a couple more things about GlobalPDX to plug a couple of events, and then also ask for you all's feedback. We have our development drinks gathering on August 9th. You all may have noticed that we kind of move around the area, and that's very purposeful because if you live in Southeast and we have development drinks in Northwest, doesn't always work. If you live out in Hillsborough, to get downtown during that part of the day is really challenging. So we haven't picked the specific spot yet, but the August gathering will be in Beaverton. So hopefully they'll give people a chance that don't otherwise have the opportunity to participate. You may have seen in a recent newsletter from GlobalPDX that we're working on a conference. When members have signed up for GlobalPDX, we've asked several questions about their interest and what they'd like to gain out of the organization, out of their membership in GlobalPDX. And we had an overwhelming response about interest in participating in a conference. So we are planning an international development conference. The date is not firm, but it's likely to be the afternoon of November 17th, and it'll be here in Portland. So please stay tuned for more information about that. But we're really trying to deliver a conference that's useful to our members. So we're going to put out a survey with some topics that we're suggesting, and we'd like your feedback, but then also like your recommendations for sessions that you would find useful. So it'll be a half day with lots of time built in for networking so that folks can get to know who else is around them. I think that covers it. So again, thank you to everyone for participating, for those online and for here, and again to
Thank you guys.